How many people here have played Myst? Anybody? A couple of people? Okay. That's good. Well, Myst, if you don't know what it is, it's a video game. During the 1990s, up to about 2002, it was one of the most popular video games during that decade. It sold approximately 6 million copies just by itself. And one of the things that Myst did that no other game had done up to that point in time was that it was totally non-violent, it was immersive, and it was a game where you kind of got yourself lost inside of this world that we created while I was working at Cyan. Now, 6 million copies of a video game with people who didn't own CD-ROMs, players at the time, was quite a bit. And the game itself continued to sell, and then it had its sequels. And the games like Riven and Exile, it had 5 different sequels at some point. And the thing about these sequels is that you had 6 million copies of Myst sold, 6 million copies of the sequels. There's 12 million copies of the game that was sold during a 10-year period. Now, that seems like a lot. And the funny thing is that I talk about this game all the time, and I forget that I actually worked on it. And, you know, at some point, I do kind of forget that I helped contribute to this game because it is something that took a big part of my life in about 2 years worth of work. And at the time, I was always kind of wondering what it is I wanted to do as an artist. And so I started seeing these games coming out during the early 90s, late 80s, called like The Manhole, for instance, which was this exploration game, a children's game, that allowed you to explore. And it allowed you to explore this little world made by Robin Miller. And he had another game called Cosmic Osmo that he came out with too, that essentially was a similar game, but a little bit more interactive. And so I started creating my own games back there, not even realizing that these guys lived in Spokane, Washington, where I was art director of the Spokesman Review newspaper at the time in 1990. Now, Cosmic Osmo was a great game, and so I started building my own type of game. I called it the Magic Shop. And what I did with the Magic Shop is I said, wow, this is kind of fun. I think maybe I'll look up Cyan World Headquarters, which is in Spokane, Washington. So going to Cyan World Headquarters, I was surprised to find that it wasn't quite exactly what I expected. You know, I thought this company would be a big game company, but it really wasn't at the time. It was these two brothers who had started Cyan, and this is more what Cyan World Headquarters was like. Now, Cyan World Headquarters obviously was an addition to the double-wide mobile home that Rand Miller had bought in the middle of friggin' nowhere in Spokane, Washington. Now, they looked at my work and they said, hey, that's really good stuff. You know, I was the only person really doing that in Spokane at the time. So they allowed me to create my own version of my studio, you know, the Meade, Washington branch of Cyan, which was in that lower left-hand window there in this studio. You know, I had to stand up in order to get a view of the people across the street, or what was at the time a bush. This is from Google Earth, by the way. Now, the name Myst itself comes from the Jules Verne book, Mysterious Island. If you can see, there's big M-Y-S-T there. You know, Robin Miller at the time was reading about this and just said, hey, you know, let's name it Myst. And basically that's about all there was to coming up with a name for them. It's just they either Myst or, you know, Journey to wherever. Now, the design process when we started designing it after they hired me, it involved basically sitting down in Rand's house in mobile, you know, in the double-wide mobile home with pizza and beer. And we basically did a walkthrough that lasted for 5 hours where they would go through these maps, and each one of these maps basically dictated exactly what it was that we had to do for the game. Like, you know, you said you walk up 3 places, you find some weird device, okay, you got 5 different selections, you click it, and boom, there you go, you got this thing. So I was told, all right, you're going to be the other graphic artist. There's 2 artists on this game. And I was going to be the other artist on it. And I said, okay, well, what do we want to do? And they said, well, we're going to paint it. And I said, no, we can't paint this. There's going to probably be 1,500 to 2,000 images to paint. And in the time, this is Photoshop 1. I don't know if anybody's familiar with computer graphics back in the early 90s. It was very primitive. And so they wanted to paint it. So I kind of just, you know, threw some picture together there and said, okay, let's throw a filter over it. What would it have looked like painted? Well, I gave them some 3D models that I had done of my Magic Shop idea, and they said, well, hey, that's pretty cool. If we did it in 3D, all we have to do is build the model once, and then what we can do is we can move a camera around, a virtual camera around to different places, and then that virtual camera will act as your interface, allow you to move through, which at the time and still today is called a virtual slideshow of a game, and it still basically is a virtual slideshow. But it's a fun one, and people get immersed in it. And the sound and the music are big parts of that too, by the way. Now, this is an image that essentially means when we started experimenting, we had to design how the terrain would work. And the dark white, an image like this with light and dark, the light areas are where the mountains rise up, the dark areas where the mountains go down. Then we put a skin on it like this here. This is a color map showing what the skin of the image of the island of Myst would look like. You put these two things together in a 3D program we had called Stratavision at the time, which is very primitive. And then basically you get the island of Myst after you throw some trees and a few buildings and a dock and a ship on it and stuff like that. You know, and then voila, you get this wonderful island that we look at this now and I kind of gag and say, my God, you know, it's like looking at a 1970s show. You say, people used to watch this stuff, you know? It's kind of like, well, thank God technology has come so much further since this period in time. Well, working on the game was a lot of fun. I could go into different, you know, I can talk about hours about this stuff, but really, since Myst, I've had a chance to do some pretty amazing things. National Geographic, I worked on Babylon 5, I've done a bunch of different things, but I owe a lot of this to Myst. And the reason Myst, it launched my career out of newspapers into doing video games and into doing different types of computer graphics and different things. And the thing that Myst has established into this day, and I have to say I'm really excited about this because the game company I'm building, we're designing games that are along the lines of going to the Rapture, Dear Esther, Abduction, Cyan's new game, fully immersive worlds that are becoming relevant again. And these games are all basically designed to be non-violent, and they're designed to be immersive. And one of the nice things about that is that finally everything seems to come full circle. And these games are the kinds of games I want my kids playing, and I want their kids to play, because they basically take you into a story. And that's what Myst was about. It was about story. And I think of everything I've learned, learning how to tell a story in a visual medium, in a digital medium, is really what I take from that whole time of working on a little computer game in 1993 called Myst. Thank you.